And we're off. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's the day after Thanksgiving. Hope everyone, first and foremost, everyone enjoyed their Thanksgiving with family and friends. The Dolphins wrapped up their week of preparations for their game against the New Orleans Saints at Hard Rock Stadium on Sunday as they come back from their bye. We will go over the injury report, the status of tight end Darren Waller and Austin Jackson, and an overall look at the AFC. Yes, the Dolphins are back in the graphic of In the Hunt. Going to be a shorter episode than usual. Again, as we come back from the Thanksgiving holiday. Before I get started, as always, please like, subscribe, share, comment, all that good stuff. Check out the audio version of the podcast if that's how you prefer to consume your podcast. And as always, my plea request to please check out the written content at MiamiDolphinsNSI.com. So as mentioned earlier, the Dolphins are facing the New Orleans Saints, who will come into this game at Hard Rock Stadium with a 2-9 record, lost against the Atlanta Falcons 24-10 last Sunday against Kirk Cousins in a game where the Saints offense could not do a whole lot. It's a Saints offense that has been kind of struggling all season. They have topped 20 points only twice the entire season, and that's when they had their full complement of players. For this game against the Dolphins, New Orleans no longer has Brandon Cooks, waived last weekend, no longer has speedy wide receiver Rashid Shaheed, traded to the Seattle Seahawks at the deadline, will not have running back Alvin Kamara, who has knee/ankle injuries and was ruled out on Friday. That's a big piece of their offense. And they may or may not have wide receiver Chris Olave, who's their one remaining significant offensive playmaker, though we could make a case for tight end Jawan Johnson, who's putting up some big numbers for the Saints in 2025. But Chris Olave is the dude who leads the team in receptions, receiving yards. He sustained a back injury in practice on Wednesday, did not practice Thursday, was limited on Friday. He was listed as questionable. And Kamara and Olave are the only two players on the Saints roster with a game status designation heading into this week 13 matchup at Hard Rock Stadium. The Dolphins had 4 players listed as questionable, nobody ruled out, nobody doubtful. Everybody on the 53-man roster practiced all week, which is obviously good news. And the 4 players listed as questionable do include 2 players who are not on the 53. That's Darren Waller and Austin Jackson. Listed as limited in practice on Friday, the same as cornerback Rasul Douglas, defensive tackle Benito Jones, also listed as questionable. Douglas, of course, has missed the past 2 games because of ankle injury. Dolphins need him in the starting lineup because Juju Brents, who started the past 2 games in the absence of Douglas, sustained a knee injury that landed him on injured reserve. And if Douglas can't play, although he said in after practice that he's okay, but if he somehow can't go or the Dolphins hold him out, then we're looking either at Jason Marshall Jr., the rookie 5th-round pick from Florida, or perhaps Ethan Bonner as your starting cornerback opposite Jack Jones, the hero of the overtime win against the Washington Commanders in Madrid. As far as Benito Jones is concerned, he's dealing with an ankle injury. If he can't go, perhaps that means more snaps, or likely that means more snaps for rookie 7th-round pick Zeke Biggers, who finally got made active the past couple of games after being active only once through the first 10 games of the season, 9 games of the season. That when Jones missed a game because of an oblique injury. So it wouldn't be as significant an absence as if Douglas can't go. Now, the situation involving Waller and Austin Jackson, Darren Waller being activated. Okay, let me go back and stay with this. They currently remain on injured reserve. The Dolphins have until 4 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern time, to activate them to the 53-man roster. To do so, the Dolphins would have to make a corresponding move because right now they're at the 53-player limit after they promoted Caleb Johnson to help out on special teams off the practice squad. This was not an elevation. They signed him to the 53 off the practice squad. That filled the roster spot that had been created when the Dolphins placed Jordan Colbert on injured reserve last weekend. That move was made for special teams. as discussed earlier on the podcast. The situation now with Waller and Jackson, if either one of them is activated to 53, corresponding move has to be made. What could that move be? Well, if we're the Dolphins maybe doing apples to apple, the Dolphins currently have 3 tight ends on the roster, those 3 being Julian Hill, Hayden Rucci, and Greg Dulcich. They could go with 4 tight ends on the active roster. They've done that before. I believe last year they had 4 tight ends on the active roster, and then make a move somewhere else. If they want to keep just 3 tight ends on the active roster, the one most logical to be waived and then brought back to the practice squad would be Hayden Rucci. Dolphins really like Julian Hill for his blocking ability, and Greg Dulcich is a guy with a lot of promise as a pass-catching tight end. Be very surprised if he wound up being the one who was waived, if they make an apples-to-apples move or position-for-position move, even though stylistically he's more like Waller would be as a receiving specialist as opposed to Rucci, who would be more of a blocking specialist. Along the offensive line, the Dolphins currently have, let me look at my roster here. It is 8 offensive linemen. That's usually the working number. If they activate Austin Jackson, that makes it 9. The 2 guys who have not seen a whole lot of playing time lately, who would scream out as the 2 most logical candidates if the Dolphins do a position-for-position swap, would be either Kendall Lamb, the veteran who's played 7 snaps on offense the entire season, that at the end of the route against the Atlanta Falcons at the Georgia Dome, or Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And then the other possibly would be Keon Smith, who of course is a guy the Dolphins have talked up quite a bit in the past, but got his shot when James Daniels went out in the opener against the Indianapolis Colts, got the work at right guard, and during the week 3 game against the Buffalo Bills, the work was deemed unacceptable enough that he was removed and replaced by Daniel Brunskill. The Dolphins then put Cole Strange, the former New England Patriots first-round pick, in the starting lineup, starting with the game against the New York Jets, and he has stayed there ever since. In fact, the Dolphins have had the same starting 5 on the offensive line for the past 8 games. And if you read Miami Dolphins on SI.com, all the content is free. You would know that that's the longest stretch with the same starting 5 on the offensive line for the Dolphins since 2012, when the Dolphins had, for their first 12 games, a starting 5 of Jake Long at left tackle, Richie Incognito at left guard, Mike Pouncey at center, John Jerry at right guard, and then rookie Jonathan Martin at right tackle. Then Jake Long got injured late in the season, and that created the switch. But 12 straight games, the Dolphins have not matched that since. Not the season of the quote-unquote unicorns in 2016, not at any point with their also very good group in 2023. In fact, they had their entire starting 5, their ideal starting 5 of 2023, which was their most talented offensive line since the quote-unquote unicorns, when they had Teron Armstead, Isaiah Wynn, Connor Williams, Robert Hunt, and Austin Jackson. So if you one who believes in continuity along the offensive line, would be nice to see. We remind you that Mike McDaniel said earlier in the week, when I asked him about the idea of moving Larry Borom from right tackle to right guard upon Austin Jackson's returns, we all assume Austin Jackson returns, he'll be back in the starting lineup. I don't know that Austin Jackson, quite frankly, is as good as some of my colleagues in the South Florida media would have you believe, but he's probably still the best right tackle on this roster. So logically, he returns, he's back in the starting lineup. So my question was, at that point, is there a consideration given to moving Larry Borom to right guard, because he's done some good work at right tackle? And at least from our eyes here in the press box, the media view probably has been more effective than Cole Strange. And Mike McDaniel's answer was basically twofold. Number one, he doesn't see an issue at right guard right now. He's very happy with the way Cole Strange has been performing, and therefore will not address a problem when there's no problem the way he sees it. And then also mentioned the idea of Austin Jackson needing to, quote unquote, play himself back into football shape. And throughout the idea, the possibility, the suggestion of a rotation at right tackle. Is it even possible that Larry Borum still starts, and then it's Austin Jackson who comes in for a few series here and there as he works his way back into shape? Possibly. With Darren Waller coming back, does that reduce the amount of jumbo heavy formation we have seen with Daniel Brunskill as an extra offensive lineman or a tight end, however you want to put it? Possibly, but the Dolphins have had some good success in recent weeks with that new formation, a renewed emphasis on the running game. They've also been lucky enough or good enough to play with a lead most of the time in those wins against Atlanta, against Buffalo, and against Washington. That didn't happen against Baltimore. They played from behind most of the game, and we saw what happened. So there are a couple of ways that they could go about it. With Darren Waller, he would break a pattern. Generally speaking, the way the Dolphins have operated, Mike McDaniel, player gets designated to return, starts practicing, and then usually it's the second week of practice after which the player gets activated and returns to game action. But Mike McDaniel, I asked McDaniel before practice on Friday if Darren Waller was in play for the game on Sunday or whether he was leaning toward giving him another week of practice. And the answer was he was in play. Everything has looked good. No setbacks. If that continues, they very well may activate him for the game against the Saints. And in the 20-minute practice viewing period that the media had, Darren Waller looked perfectly fine. So we shall see how that plays out. Regardless of who's in the lineup, this is a game the Dolphins absolutely, positively should win handily. The Saints, as we mentioned, are 2-9. They're tied for last in the NFL in scoring with the Las Vegas Raiders. And now they do not have, again, no Alvin Kamara, maybe Chris Olave. Zero reason for the Dolphins to lose this game. It would be, there are a few words to describe just how bad. It's one of those tough games because the Dolphins, it's almost like a no-win situation because they need to win. They should win handily. If we're looking at the big picture, Mike McDaniel will not allow himself to think about the big picture. He made the point that veterans, he's certain, are helping the younger players with the math. And the math is the Dolphins still have work to do before they get into playoff contention or in the playoff picture, so to speak. But they did show up back again in the hunt category in the graphics. This was after the late afternoon game on Thanksgiving that Kansas City lost to put them at 6-6. Later that night, Baltimore also lost. They're 6-6. And then the possibility exists that there could be two more 6-6 teams after the games of Sunday, those two teams being the Houston Texans and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Dolphins, if they win, they'll be 5-7. That's a game behind those two teams with now 5 games remaining after that. So this notion that the Dolphins are completely out of playoff contention, no, obviously their margin for error is microscopic. This is what happens when you start off a season 2-7, but they could get themselves in the playoff picture, in the playoff hunt, if they can take care of their business against the Saints on Sunday, against the New York Jets the following Sunday, and then they're going to have to win some games where they might be underdogs. They're not games that are gimmies, so to speak. Pittsburgh Steelers in week 15, Cincinnati Bengals in week 16, Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 17, New England Patriots in week 18. As we are going to do until the Dolphins are mathematically eliminated from playoff contention, there's a rooting guide on MiamiDolphinsOnSI.com where we rank the games of the weekend that affect the Dolphins in terms of playoff picture and the order in which we are rooting for a certain team. And I mentioned the Cincinnati game, and one quick point there. This is a game that's on Sunday night, December 21st. The Dolphins announced on Thanksgiving morning it's going to be a celebration for the 60th anniversary of the franchise, which of course started in 1966. It's the 60th season. The Dolphins will wear their throwback aqua uniforms for that game, which I know is going to please a lot of Dolphin fans, and certainly the one with the X account that make throwback permanents. Sure, love that. And then this game right now is scheduled for Sunday evening. Right now, the Bengals, even though they looked impressive against Baltimore on Thursday night with their 32-14 victory, they're still only 4-8. They play at Buffalo next Sunday. Then they have a rematch against Baltimore the following week. The decision on that game has to be made no later than 6 days before the game, which means Monday, December 15th. So that's 2 more games for the Bengals. They're 4-8 right now. Have a hard time envisioning the NFL keeping the Bengals in that primetime slot if they don't win the next 2 games. So they're 5-9. But we shall say the Dolphins also have to do their part. So keep an eye on it. As far as those talking or wondering about the idea of the Monday night games being flexed, the game at Pittsburgh, Steelers are not a team that gets flexed. Not to say it's never happened. I'd have to look at the record, but it's very rare because the Pittsburgh draws eyeballs regardless of who they play, when they play, where they play. So, but again, best case scenario for the Dolphins from this end, it stays a Sunday night game because it will mean that the Dolphins will have put themselves at least in the picture for a playoff spot. So, but that's got to start with taking care of business against the Saints on Sunday at Hard Rock Stadium. We will be back with our regular live post-game breakdown on Sunday at 5 p.m. And hopefully, logically, we should be discussing a convincing Miami Dolphins victory against the Saints. Until then, everyone have a great weekend.